Welcome to the eDrum Workshop's Roland module shootout. I'm going to be comparing all of the current generation of Roland modules, the Roland TD-07, the TD-17, the TD-27 and the TD-50, so that you can hear the differences and the similarities between them all. I'll just give you a quick rundown of how it's going to go and then we'll get right into it. This shootout is focused entirely on how these modules sound. I'm not going to be focused on the playability and I'm not going to be focusing on the kits either. I'm going to be showing off each of the modules with my own kit setup rather than the kits that they're supplied with. And just for the sake of speed, consistency and, well, ease for myself, I'm using the MIDI out from the TD-50 into the other modules. Some of you might have questions about how I'm using the Roland digital pads on modules that don't support it, like the TD-07 and the TD-17. I answer those questions and more in a previous video that I did about creating a MIDI in on a module that doesn't have a MIDI in port. So I'm going to compare two stock presets per module. I've tried to pick the ones that sound the closest to each other across the modules. Then I'm going to compare two kits that I've created myself on the modules. These will be created entirely from internal sounds from within the modules, but I'm going to take advantage of all of the sound shaping controls available in each module. And then finally, I'm going to do a comparison just between the 17, the 27 and the 50 with kits that I've created using sample imports as layers. The TD-07 can't import samples, so unfortunately it has to sit that round out. Let's get to it. So which module do you think did it best out of those four? Did any of them surprise you when compared to the others? There's some things that really stood out to me, so I'm going to dive into that, but I'd really love to hear your thoughts on it, so don't forget to drop a comment below. For me, first off, it was actually really difficult to find presets that lined up well across each of the modules. It was simple enough between the 07 and the 17 because the 07 pretty much contains only TD-17 sounds. However, the TD-27 and the 50 were off doing their own thing entirely with the presets. Delving deeper, I think it really brings to light the distinct separation between the TD-07 and 17 and the TD-50. The 07 and the 17 sound quite similar to some degree, though I do think that the 07 actually does some stuff better than the 17, which is pretty weird, and it's something that I touched upon on my first impressions video not so long ago. The new overheads option and the transient designer bring a lot to the table in terms of sound, and the TD-17 doesn't have those features. It also feels like the other modules have a lot of top-end presence that is missing from the TD-17. Now this could be a good or bad thing depending on your opinions. It makes everything sound a little bit smoother in the 17, and all of that top end is pretty unnatural and definitely part of that Roland sound characteristic. But when you do a side-by-side comparison like this, it makes all of the other ones pop out a lot more than the 17. The 07 can't layer sounds and you can't import samples, so the 17 can edge over that one by creative use of these functions to beef the sound up. There's also a pretty obvious difference between those two modules and the 27 and the 50 due to the lack of compression options. Those two modules just can't sound quite as produced as the 27 or the 50, and it's going to be personal preference as to whether you think that's a good thing or not. Now the TD-50 sounds nothing like those two modules in my opinion. Well, I mean, other than the fact that they all sound like Roland modules. But the overall sound set inside the module is completely different, and there's basically no shared instruments between the TD-50 and the 07 and the 17, except for some of the processed electronic and percussion sounds. The cymbals are probably where the TD-50 shines in compared to all of the other modules. They just seem to sound much fuller and wider than the cymbals in the other modules, but without really having to put in any extra work to achieve that. So that brings me to the TD-27. I feel like the TD-27 really highlights the sort of iterative approach to this generation that Roland seemed to have taken. This is something that I could probably make a full video on because I feel like this generation of Roland modules is quite muddled in terms of features and sounds. But the TD-27 can comfortably sound like either end of the spectrum, and there's a reason for that. Pretty much all of the acoustic style sounds from the TD-07 and 17 are in the 27 module. And on top of that, basically all of the acoustic instruments from the TD-50 are in this module too. The TD-27 also contains all of the processing options from the TD-50. This means that you can dial it in even closer to the TD-50's sound. So effectively the TD-27 can sound like a TD-07 or 17 on steroids, or it can sound like a slightly easier on the ears, tamer TD-50, or pretty much anything in between those two options. When it came to handling the samples, you can make them all sound reasonably similar, and I suppose that's pretty much to be expected because you're using the exact same samples. The TD-17 sounds a little bit more like a sample slapped on top of another sound, and this overall is because of the lack of pad and master compression options. Compression really helps to glue the two sounds together. On the TD-17 I've used a sort of workaround using the lo-fi compressor multi effects, but that's by no means a perfect solution. However, I do think that the samples still hold up well overall. If I've missed a point of comparison today that you would have liked to have heard, or if you just want to see another video in this style, let me know down in the comments. And of course, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Please pop a like on the video, it really helps the channel. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!